For the average person, what you're about to see is going to blow your mind, because you're going to see deep into satanic, ritualistic aspects of the royal family. The House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, the House of Windsor.
There are some who would argue that in the 21st century, a monarchy of any description is an outdated institution. But, paradoxically, it only takes the merest hint of a royal scandal or conspiracy for the world press to be in hot pursuit of the story. So how did it all begin? Well, for the British, the answer to that question is quite simply when the first kings and queens emerged from the warring tribes of ancient times to wear a crown and sit upon a throne. However, they had to do a great deal more than that. Kings, or queens for that matter, had to be fierce warriors, not only to seize power, but also to withstand challenges from their fellow countrymen and foreign invaders, and the term hostile takeover back then meant precisely that. A recipe for conspiracy if ever there was one. William II died in very suspicious circumstances, and was succeeded very speedily by his brother Henry I, whose reign ended when he died of food poisoning. Now you may be wondering how Queen Victoria's exemplary good name could possibly be associated with either scandal or conspiracy. Whatever the truth behind all these conspiracy theories, their association with Queen Victoria is absolutely fascinating, and even if nothing more than over-imaginative flights of fancy, the stories show a very dark side of Victorian London, not so far removed from the magnificent facade of Buckingham Palace.
This film does commit treason, but it is the truth. History tells us that the German impostors who occupy the British throne have consistently tortured, illegally imprisoned, and even murdered, sometimes with their own hands, people who have criticized the monarchy throughout history, has been the driving force behind the royal political elite for thousands of years. Many people believe that conspiracy in world politics simply does not exist. But it is a provable fact that the royal political elite have committed murder to gain power over and over again throughout the ages. Many of these murders were the result of a conspiracy usually orchestrated by politicians and aristocrats serving members of royal families.
In the biblical Hebrew Bible, we have the story of Jacob, who steals the crown from his brother Esau. And Israel is the stolen crown that was ripped off by Jack, or Jacob. The trickster figure, or the clown, the jester, the Jacob, the Jack. Like when somebody steals a plane, it's called a hijacking. Or like when somebody tries to steal your car, it's called a carjacking. Because you got jacked. And the current royal family jacked the crown.
Where does the royal family live? You might think it's here, but you'd be wrong. In fact, they live here. and their name certainly isn't Windsor. I've made a startling discovery. There's good evidence that's recently come to light that back in the Middle Ages, one of the kings of England was illegitimate. And if that's so, it means that every king and queen of our country since shouldn't by rights have sat on the throne. But if not them, then who? Well, I've traced the real royal family, the bloodline that's been robbed of its inheritance. And I've discovered the person alive today who should be Britain's reigning monarch. What am I doing making a fuss about a centuries-old skeleton in the royal family's closet? Well, to me, it's all about the rules of the club. The monarchy rests entirely on blood and inheritance. There's an absolutely rigid system for passing on the throne. Prince Charles is first in line, then Prince William, then Harry, then Andrew, etc. The chain of power and wealth and privilege depends on two rules. One, you have to be of the royal bloodline, and two, you have to be born legitimate. But what happens if the system goes wrong, if the chain gets broken? 500 years ago, that's exactly what happened, and this is the man responsible. Edward IV was king, but his claim to the throne was fatally flawed. I found evidence that he was conceived not by his royal father, but by a humble archer. Edward was born in late April 1442. Counting back 40 weeks earlier puts his conception right in the middle of the 5-week absence of his supposed father. Second, the lantern-jawed Edward looked nothing like the thin-faced man who was supposed to be his father. Top here is the great line of British kings through from Alfred the Great to Henry II to Edward III. But after Edward, suddenly the whole thing explodes. It's whoosh, because it's the War of the Roses and all the kings start dying off like flies until in 1485, when Richard III dies, there are no claimants left except this one, Henry VII, and his claim comes through this line, which is an extremely dodgy one because it's about the fact that John of Gaunt had a mistress Catherine and they had children, and that line is specifically barred from inheriting the crown. So in order to legitimise himself, Henry VII married this woman, Elizabeth of York, and her claim is based on the fact that she is the daughter of Edward IV. But if Edward IV is illegitimate, then that invalidates the claim of Elizabeth and consequently of Henry and of Henry VIII and of Elizabeth I and of the Georges and of Victoria and everyone all the way down to the House of Windsor.
So they're bringing out these wonderful eulogies to Edward, but they keep having to emphasize what should be obvious. Conceived in wedlock, of the royal blood. But he's on the throne. But when we actually look at the itinerary of Cecily and Richard, we find they've travelled south by the beginning of June 1441. So this conception would have had to have taken place in May 1441.
Why is that a problem?
Edward's birth date is the 28th of April 1442. That is
11 months concern.
That is some pregnancy.
So basically the royal family are ruthless people hell-bent on taking over and controlling the world. And the same Queen Bee that runs this world is the same Queen Bee that runs this world. The royal killer Queen Bee, which is the monarchy of the beehive. And that's why everyone behaves and works for the Queen Bee. And that's exactly where we get the word behave, which is the beehive. And notice the shape of the honeycomb of the beehive. It's a hexagon, or a hexagram, which is the symbol of the sexagram, or the Star of David, the Star of Divide. It's also known as the hex, like when you put a spell on somebody and you hex them. The same symbol that makes the world beehive or behave. So believe me, the Queen Bee runs this world exactly the way she wants it to be ran. And all of her soldier bees make sure the worker bees know exactly who's in charge. And it doesn't matter what country you come from or what tree you come from. Because just like in the game of life and death, which is known as chess, the queen is the most powerful piece on the board, just like the queen is the most powerful piece in our world. And in the ancient old world of paganism, the witch is considered the most high, the high priestess, the queen, or the goddess, the witch, the queen of the night, the queen of the monarchy, or the moon arch, the single royal queen of the underworld, the queen bee, Elizabeth. Witchcraft is an old world religion of Europe, which predates Christianity by thousands of years, dating back to the ancient Druidic order, giving us our modern-day Wicca, which means the wise one, and we get our word truth from the ancient elder druid, which is the wood from the Drew tree, which is what we base our logic on, and the silent, deadly owl in the tree gives us our owl of wisdom, the wise old owl. And that's why the Illuminati was making sacrifices to the old owl in the Bohemian Grove, or the Valley of the Moon. And of course the ritual of the cremation of care was held on a full moon. So in the craft, or in witchcraft, moon witchcraft is using certain phases of the moon to accomplish magical workings. And remember that the moon controls our emotions and our mind, like mind control. And of course, this is where we get our word mind from Min, the moon god, the Egyptian fertility god of the moon. And the word mind is simply Min, the moon, plus D, which is 4, as in the 4 lobes of the human brain. And that's why we have 4D, or the 4th dimension, which is the dimensional Dia Min Sion. And that's why cinema uses the sin of the moon. And we also get our word mental from the Min TL, and we judge if somebody is sane by the moon, sanity. And then we have Selene, the Luna Dea goddess of the moon. And that's why the Illuminati killed the goddess Selena on the night of the Black Moon of Death, at the end of the month, on the 31st, exactly like when they killed the moon goddess Diana at the end of the month on the 31st, on the 13th hour, on the 13th pillar. And that's why Selena also died during the 13th hour. And of course, the moon goddess Diana was killed next to the river Sin, as in the moon god Sin. And of course, the moon gives us our lunatics. And again, we get our word thought from the moon god Thort. And from the moon phase, we get our word mood, our feeling or our emotions. And that's why they tell us that a cow makes the moo sound. Which brings us back to moon witchcraft. Why do you think the media is constantly comparing Princess Diana and Kate Middleton? You see, most people are not aware of the ritual significance of these two women. Dianic Wicca or witchcraft is an old world religion of the old world, and it worships the moon goddess Diana. She was known as Diana Lucifera, the queen of the night, she who bears the light. She was the goddess of the sacred grove and of the crossroads. And now you know the exact truth of why we have the state called Indiana, or in Diana, the state of the crossroads. And that's why the state of Indiana has the flag with the torch on it. And that's exactly why, where they killed and sacrificed Diana, they placed